everyone, and welcome back to Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today we are sitting down with Danielle and Drew, who adopted through our agency. Danielle and Drew unfortunately went through what we call a disruption, where they were placed with a child and the biological parents changed their minds. Since then, they have been replaced, and they're going to share a little bit about their experience. So welcome, Danielle and Drew.
Thank you.
So initially, when you first came into this process, obviously your goal was to build your family, right? And have an open adoption. Those are all kind of the values of who we are as an agency. But had you really thought about or prepared for what would this feel like if we went through all this and then things changed and a disruption or a disappointment occurred? Had you really prepared for that?
So definitely not. I don't really know if you can prepare for it. Like, I think we always had in our head that we were a little bit guarded, right? We had been coached along the way, like, hey, this does happen. Like, be prepared that it could happen, and it's really not a fun thing to go through. But I don't think we were completely prepared for it, and I don't think. On top of that, I don't think people around us really understood what we went through, right? It's not something that a lot of people go through in their life. It's not unique, but it's a fairly unique situation relative to everybody else, and that really it was a challenge for sure.
What was it like going through the motions, Danielle, of just the concept of like, okay, here you are, you've signed placement paperwork, there's this baby in the hospital, and then the birth parents ultimately change their mind. How did that feel?
It was devastating. A lot goes into it even before, we were matched before the child was born. So we had a couple of weeks of just sort of investing our emotions and our hopes into the situation. Of course, we did our preparations in the house, making a nursery and things like that. When we got to the placement and we signed the paperwork, it was just that next step of just having the baby in our arms, and that's the part that didn't happen. So it was just interesting to have all of that build up, and then once the disruption happens, there's no more connection to that person, to that family. So there really is just kind of like a hole there. Sure. And like Drew said, it's something where it is a loss in a sense, and it's something that a lot of people around us maybe didn't fully understand. Through Adoptions from the Heart, we have other people who are going through the process who can at least understand a little bit better sort of what we went through.
Sure. Kind of a tougher question for you, but whenever people hear about a disruption and biological parents changing their minds, sometimes people get angry at the birth parents for making that choice. Did you guys go through that, or do you feel like you understood the rights they had and it was kind of a tough thing?
We've actually talked about this. We had some anger, but we had nowhere to direct it because we really couldn't feel angry at the birth parents because, they chose to parent. There's no fault in that. And everyone, within the agency was so supportive of us, and I'm sure so supportive of the birth family as well. So we did have a period where we did have some anger and sadness, but just really nowhere to direct it.
I would say that's accurate. Yeah, I think it was kind of just like general anger, and we talked about it because we had a really long ride home from where we were waiting, and so it was 5-6 hours in the car talking about it, and one of the first things was like, I'm really like unhappy, but it's like we can't really be too unhappy because this person's going to be with their birth parents, and it's like it worked out. It worked out okay for them. It just didn't work out how we thought it was going to work out, and it was just like, can't be mad, but we're also a little bit mad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a really great way to put it. It's almost like you're feeling these emotions. You may in fact feel angry and disappointed and hurt and frustrated, but knowing where to target that and recognizing that it may not be one person's fault or, one entity or one process. It's just you're sad and you're upset.
Right.
And that's okay to feel that way. But learning how to deal with that is important, and that can be really hard for folks, and sometimes people do need to take a pause after they've experienced a disruption or a disappointment, which is what happens when biological parents change their mind before placement. But I'm happy to hear that you guys were able to channel your emotions and kind of navigate next steps. Fast forward, you have now been replaced and are very happy with your daughter. What gave you hope to keep going? Because I know there's a lot of adoptive families that still struggle having experienced a disruption and maybe had to wait another year or even 2 years. What advice would you give them?
I would just say, I mean, don't lose hope that your baby is out there. The situation that we're in now is so right for us. And it's something that if we hadn't experienced the disruption, we wouldn't be in the place we are now.
I think that's accurate. I think we wanted to get back into it right away. We were like, trying to get past what happened as quickly as possible. And like Danielle said, like the situation we're in really is great. And it, our social worker did a really great job of like keeping in contact with us the days and weeks after this happened, just to make sure we were okay. And it was nice because not a lot of people were doing that.
Right.
Like I said, they didn't understand what we were going through.
Yeah.
And we kind of wanted to move past it as soon as possible and get back into the book to move forward. And she kept telling us, she was like, when it happens, it's going to be right. And I was just kind of like, okay, that's very cliche, but this is right. Like it's just
right.
She was completely correct. Like this was supposed to be the situation for us, and we feel that now every day, having our child.
And I wish that feeling and that hope we could give to everybody, because regardless if you have experienced a disruption or not, just the concept of, will it happen for me, right? I've gone through this process. I want to become a parent. I've waited for so long. Will it ever happen? Like, we want to give that feeling to everybody so they know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But it's hard because you're not in it. And until it happens where you say, okay, this was meant to be. I may have waited 3 years, but handing that baby to me, I realized this was the right baby for me.
Right.
But that's easier said than done.
It's easier said than done.
Talk to us about what life is like for you today, what type of open adoption you have, and just kind of your overall experience with building your family.
Yeah, so things are a little bit busier than they were a couple months ago, for sure. We have I would say a very open adoption. We have a great relationship with Autumn's birth parents. We have seen them 2 times now in person since Autumn was given to us, and it's great. We're sending them pictures on almost a daily basis. They're checking in on her. We're trying to make them feel feel like Autumn is cared for and loved, and kind of showing her, hey, her life is going to be great with us. And it's been good. It's been a good relationship so far.
Autumn gives us so much joy too, on the day-to-day, so it's really been a joy to have her, and like Drew said, getting to know her birth parents has been so reassuring and comforting, and it's been great.
Well, and I know for you guys, you have extended that openness beyond birth mom and birth father, and actually have a relationship with birth mom's family, right? With her grandfather, who she calls her father. Talk to us about that, because I don't know if people really understand the extent of extended family members and open adoption, and what that feels like for you with this village of people who love her.
It was honestly awesome to see. Like, we didn't realize that at all until we met him in person.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how they have like a Google Drive of like photos that we send of Autumn, and like her family and her her grandfather have access to it, and he's like, oh, I'm checking the Google Drive every day. And I was like, it's so cool that like there's people beyond the people that we're interacting with that have a vested interest in Autumn, and it was really cool to see in person, and it just made us feel good. We were like, oh, these people really love Autumn like we love Autumn, and that it was really touching. And I don't know, it made us feel really great about the relationship after seeing that, and it was just like it motivated us to just grow that relationship even further, I think.
Yeah. And it really was so just welcoming. Like, being able to meet the extended family made us feel more welcome. It wasn't just, the relationship stops with us and the birth parents. Opening that up to her, the rest of her biological family too, was it was great.
Well, and we talked about there being various levels of open adoption. And for you guys, you're definitely on the higher level, right? So you have direct contact, you send pictures and videos via text, and there are still boundaries in place, right? This is not a co-parenting relationship, but you do have that direct contact. I'm going to imagine that's not something you necessarily envisioned when you first started this journey. Can you talk a little bit about that and just the idea of being open? Because I think some folks are a little hesitant at the beginning, which is understandable, especially not knowing who your birth parents are going to be. Talk to us about why you were willing to open up to that and create a space for open adoption growing.
I 100% credit Adoptions from the Heart for this. And our social worker will tell you, like, I would say I was nervous about open adoption coming into the process. And we just learned so much about why it's so important for the child in this process and how it's better for them. And really just the education we received along the way is what got us from kind of where I started the process to where I was like, I feel fine having this level of contact. And then of course, once we actually are in contact with them, they're really just great people that love Autumn. It makes it so much easier.
Really applaud you for being honest about that, Drew, because it's okay to say that. Like, it's not saying that you didn't believe in open adoption, right? So obviously we're an open adoption agency. We have certain levels of minimum openness that you have to be okay with coming in. But the idea of what this really feels like and looks like and, having all this contact is new. Like, it's okay to say we were a little hesitant. It took some time for us to come around. But the difference is you were open to it. So people who are just closed off of, this is all I'm okay with, I'm not budging, I'm not being willing to open my heart at all, that's where I think it can become a little more challenging. But you were never like that. Like, you were always open to it. It just took a minute.
Yeah.
And I think part of the education process too is understanding that, kind of seeing past the infant stage with an adopted child. I mean, the child is going to grow and they're going to have complicated questions and they're going to have this urge to find, their birth family. And for me, kind of seeing that perspective of what is it going to look like in 15 years, 16 years, 18 years, I don't want to be an obstacle in my child's life. I want to be able to have a resource to get them the answers that they're going to be looking for.
Well, and how fortunate are you that that's already happening? Right. So you have birth parents that are still wanting to participate. Not all birth parents do. So Autumn's already growing up having that connection all the time. So it's not like 10 years from now, 15 years from now we're going to open the book of, let's talk about your adoption story, right? Like, you've already been living it in a real way. Right. And that's that much better for Autumn.
Right. The hope, I think, is that this will just be her normal.
Yes.
And maybe there won't be questions because it's just her normal.
Or easier to answer questions.
Or easier to answer.
Exactly. And also some questions that maybe her birth parents themselves can answer. Right?
Exactly.
Straight from them.
Right.
So you were placed with Autumn when she was 6 months old. What was that like? Because a lot of families expect that they're going to be placed with a newborn, right? A majority of our placements are still newborns directly from the hospital, but we have been seeing an increase of women and men calling in later on looking to make an adoption plan. What went through your minds when you were considering this situation, and anything you want to share for people to be prepared for when being placed with a non-newborn?
We put a lot of time into our profile key and like what situation would be right for us. And I think we kind of agreed early that like we were okay with a child beyond the baby stage. We just felt like we would be able to adapt to the situation. I would say one mistake we probably made is I think we took her back in time a little bit when we got her, where we were like, we're like, oh, we're getting a baby. But Autumn was 6 months old and she had a routine and she was eating foods, and we were kind of just like, okay, we're going to bottle feed you again. And so I think we kind of like took her back in time a couple weeks and then realized like, oh, she's past some of this baby stage stuff. But we're new parents. We didn't know any better at the time. So if we could do it over, we probably would have made a couple of, with
Minor
food
tweaks,
and
yeah.
a couple minor tweaks along the way. Not huge mistakes or anything like that, but things that like looking back, we were like, okay, like, you know, you probably were, we didn't need to be hovering over your crib the first night, just making sure you're okay for 12 straight hours. Like, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
And then again, a benefit of the openness too is once we did meet her birth parents, talking about foods that she's tried already, so we knew what she'd been exposed to. So things like that was very helpful.
That's an important piece that I hadn't really thought of, especially because she was with her birth parents the first 5-6 months of her life. They have those memories, they have those stories, and the fact that you have this open relationship, they can share that with her and share that with you,
Right.
so that they can talk about those first few months of her life.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that you'd like to share just overall about your journey? Picture prospective adoptive parents on the other side of this video, or even birth parents, or people who just want to understand your story. Anything you want them to know about becoming an adoptive parent and building your family through adoption here at Adoptions from the Heart.
The only thing I would say is that after your place, like, it really feels right to me. Any concerns I had about anything were very quickly alleviated. Like, it just feels, we thought this was the right decision for us, and it just 100% feels great at this point. It validates everything, and a lot of the fear of the unknown goes away on the other end of things. So.
Yeah. And I would just say, keep your mind and heart open to open adoption, because there are different levels of openness, but for us, the level we have has really been so comforting for me and for Drew, getting to know her birth parents, getting to know where she's from, and it really gives us a positive outlook going forward. So just keep an open mind.
Well, you guys have been great. I know you share a very special relationship with your social worker in New Jersey, and I appreciate you being as prepared as you had been and continue to be. Obviously, it's also dedicated to your hearts and your ability to really open up. And we just wish you lots of luck in the future with your daughter and the openness you have with her birth parents. And we just want to say thanks.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
We'll continue to tune in, guys, and we appreciate your support.